Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here. Hope you're doing really well. This is a jam-packed news show. Jam-packed Let's Talk Chelsea. I mean, it really is. I did not think because of the international break, maybe slow news, that we were going to have much to speak about, but we do. We have quite a bit to speak about, and so much so that I think on YouTube I may break down this news show into different segments over the next couple of days because each kind of issue, nearly all of them, deserve their own video because there's so much to delve into. First thing is Laurence, Stewart and Paul Winstanley giving an extensive interview with Matt Law. It's their first proper media interview rather than just with the club, which they did last year. There's some interesting quotes coming out of that. Thomas Tuchel is in talks to become England manager. We'll delve into that. Reece James back from injury, and Esteval Willian giving an extensive interview about his career, Cole Palmer and Chelsea, to The Guardian. So as I say, all of those are quite in depth and there's quite a lot to speak about. But if you're listening on the podcast, I will probably just upload the full show audio, which is why if you're watching on YouTube, go over to the podcast format, podcast stream, can't get it, a podcast channel, whatever we call it, podcast feed. That was the word I was looking for. So much going on today, I can't think of the right word. And subscribe there if you want to listen to it right now, the full show, Son of Chelsea, Let's Talk Chelsea. Let's go into it. Firstly though, with Paul Winstanley and Laurence Stewart, it's weird because, you know, almost a year ago, they did that interview with the club. It was an official club channel interview, and a lot of the quotes from that have come back and been used to criticise Paul Winstanley and Laurence Stewart. Now, Matt Law does reference in a piece, this actual interview was supposed to take place, I think, a month ago, but because of complications, it's now happened in October, where things, in terms of tone, in terms of mood around Chelsea, is a lot better. It is a lot more positive. It is a little bit better for them to conduct this interview now, rather than say right at the start of the year. I think it would have been a more difficult tone for them, especially if you think about during that September international break this time a month ago, after the international break in September, we were, of course, reacting to the bombshell news about Bowley and Igbali splitting up, basically, and the conflict in the ownership. So it would have been more awkward for them. But here, obviously, they can sort of delve into things and very much reflect and feel positive, because on the pitch, things are looking a lot better under Enzo Maresca, even though we have got a difficult run coming up. But there are three key parts to this I want to delve into: PSR, Maresca, and the academy. There's more, and there are more kind of quotes to delve into. I'm sure others will be doing that, but if you want to read the full interview, go in the description box below. Link to the article from Matt Law will be there. Let's jump into it with PSR. So, of course, a lot of this about PSR during the summer. Is PSR just a way for clubs to kind of back scratch each other and get themselves out of financial penalties and restrictions? But both of them contest this directly. So firstly, Paul Winstanley says, you're not going to get any benefit from a PSR position on it anymore. And we've still continued with it. So if it was just for PSR, we'd have stopped doing it. So this is directly talking about the long-term contracts that Chelsea have given to players. People have criticised it. And he's sort of looking at the fact that the rules have been altered on that, but they're still doing it. So it clearly isn't still for PSR reasons. He goes on to say that was never at the forefront of the owners' minds when we spoke about them doing it, how we see it working, how we all see it working as a club. I don't think that's completely true, because Omari Kellerman is kind of one of the biggest ones for me, a signing that still makes such little sense and very much felt at the time. There was kind of this domino effect where Aston Villa were fearing about PSR. I think Everton were fearing about PSR, and you had Chelsea involved in it as well. It kind of felt like a train of different transfers all happening at once, and very few of them made a lot of sense, especially the Kellerman one to Chelsea. So PSR is still something that is absolutely relevant, and I don't think it can just be swept under the rug as something that, you know, now doesn't matter anymore and wasn't kind of part of their thinking, because some of the transfers just don't really look like deals that are specifically about upgrading your squad. This is something I talked about, you know, regularly during the summer. Currently, it looks like Chelsea have a decent squad, but of course, in the long term, we'll reflect on that as well, and we hope it's more positive than negative. But the PSR thing will come back when they speak about the academy. He then obviously was asked, both of them, were asked by Matt Law about Maresca, the change in coach. This is what they had to say. This is firstly from Laurence Stewart. Going back to the plan, we made some really clear decisions on the way of playing, the football style, the identity we want to have, and I think that's been shown in the coaching hires. And then I think this is Winstanley who picks it up and says, clearly Enzo coming in, I think everybody is seeing from Leicester the style of play aspect, but also Felipe. Anybody who has seen the under-21s will see there's a clear playing style developing and evolving there with principles that are connected and similar to the first team. The same with the women's team as well. Sonia has referenced some things that are consistent about wanting to have possession of the ball, play out from the back and be aggressive in the final third out of possession. So in terms of the plan, there are really visible elements. Funny thing is, we've spoken about how Maresca's Chelsea are not playing as dogmatically as I think a lot of us expected them to. I've just wrote for CFC Fanzine. It's the latest piece for the fanzine that is probably going to be out this weekend if you pick up the fanzine about this. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch as the season progresses, whether that style becomes more pronounced and goes towards what was advertised for Maresca, or he continues with a style that I think is engaging and getting fan support currently. Interesting to see how it develops. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any harmony between the club. I think you look at the best clubs in Europe and there is that consistency and sense of unity and just clarity across all departments of the club. That's something I've wanted for a long period of time, and I hope that's what is coming through Chelsea. But that's something that you can't really judge in 2 months. You have to judge it really, especially when you add in the academy and just as a club collectively, you have to judge that over years, unfortunately, not months and weeks. So of course, 2-3 years down the line, we can look back and make a firmer judgment than now. But I'm not entirely sure in terms of if I'm looking at the first team and Enzo Maresca, and especially when he talks about coaching hires, like there is a difference in the way they hired Mauricio Pochettino and Enzo Maresca. And it's in terms of briefing, in terms of the way it's been sold to us, this kind of insistence on possession has only really come about in the last couple of months. I mean, it seemed like a very clear pivot post Pochettino that they were suddenly obsessed with possession, and seeing how Maresca has worked with the first team so far. I think the Tifo did a video where they looked at Chelsea's, just looking at numbers difference between Chelsea of last season and this season, and there actually isn't. We're actually playing less short passes now than we were last season, which, yeah, again, just doesn't fit into maybe what they wanted the team to be. But as I say, that's not a negative if the team is being successful on the pitch. The final thing is about the academy. Matt Law directly references and asks them clearly about Mason Mount and Conor Gallagher, 2 players who were sold, 2 players, homegrown players, contractual dramas that went on and ended in quite a toxic way on both cases. So there are similarities there. And then it's kind of talked about, again, PSR, pure profit. Are you selling these players purely for financial reasons, even though some of these players are very important for you? I think that absolutely, of course, was the case for Conor Gallagher over the course of this past summer. So Winstanley says, we had a significant offer for one of our academy products this summer that we absolutely chose not to take. There's a lot of misconception out there. Who that's for? Is that for Levi Colwill? Is that for Reece James? I can't think of any others. You know, Trevor Chalobah, that doesn't add up because they were trying to sell Trev for the entirety of the summer. I can't really think who they're referring to there, other than Reece or Levi. And that wasn't really reported. I mean, maybe there would have been some echoes of it, but I can't remember a big story. We definitely, of course, had interest from about Levi before he signed that new contract for Chelsea. That was evident, but maybe there was a big offer potentially for Reece James. But I'm just speculating here. We've had 2 debuts this year. They say that there's 3 or 4 more players in behind who we think we can push through this year as well that we're keen to do. The manager's on board with that. He's aware of the players coming through. We give them opportunities when we can make sure they've got that pathway. It goes on to say here, it's not just about PSR, it's contractual statuses, it's circumstances. The 2 players you referenced, Mount and Gallagher, there were contractual problems that we walked into. It's really important for us to bring through players. The reality is that if it was that, there are other players and more players who we could have sold as well. Like Paul said, there's been interest in other players that we've turned down. Kind of going through the same as Winstanley. He does add here, every decision has been a performance-based decision, which people have opinions on because that's football, and absolutely with homegrown players, it's always more emotional. So yeah, I mean, credit to them for doing the interview, credit for them, you know, for taking questions from someone who doesn't work for the clubs. You expect it to be more objective, more critical, asking more awkward questions. Whether they weren't asked this or just they kind of dodged a question, the fact that they don't respond or kind of talk about the way those players were treated, and it was quite obvious the way those players were treated, the bomb squad, I don't think is great. I think, but maybe it's because it's awkward, right? How do you respond to that? The fact that players were told they can no longer train with the first team despite not doing much to merit that. That created headlines. I just think on a very basic level with any player, I just think that there was just no point with that treatment to begin with, because I think it just created unsavory headlines and an unsavory mood in an already messy summer that didn't really need it. I just think it became a self-defeating act and made the Gallagher and Chalobah, of course Chalobah's gone out on loan, so we'll see what happens there, but especially Gallagher, it just made that exit all the more toxic. And performance based is not something that I think at the moment you can make more of an argument, because as I say, of very recent results, but they also talk early on in the piece about long term, so we judge them on long term. They've had the 4 windows now, and as I said with my Enzo Maresca video and show last week about, maybe I'm wrong on Maresca and things go well, and happy days if that's the case. If Paul Winstanley and Laurence Stewart have overseen a window that does significantly improve Chelsea, again, I'll be happy to be proven wrong. But I think for them, it's all on Maresca working. And I think to try and act now like everything's perfect and there's been no mistakes or nothing's worth criticising, I think is unfair and a little bit disingenuous, which maybe some people will be arguing because things are looking a lot better now. But at least they've done it, and I think it gives some interesting insight. So let me know your thoughts on what they said in the comments below.